This is
Make It Plain.
Make It Plain.
MIP
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make It Plain.
Get woke.
The founder and director of IKG Cultural Resources and also current director of the ASA Restoration Project, which is funding the excavation and restoration of 3 25th dynasty tombs of Cushite noblemen on the west bank of Luxor, Egypt. Tony Browder with us, Anthony Browder with us throughout this entire month of February, African American History Month. Welcome back, my brother.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me back again.
And Hotep.
Peace.
We're going to reclaim that word too for what is good. Last broadcast, we touched on Carter G. Woodson. So there's some education that has to happen there. You know, people like to claim, some of our people, that this month was given to us because it was the shortest month of the year.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, Dr. Woodson chose this month for the appropriate reasons. Did he not? So, I mean, even the choice of this month was self-determined. But what you also said last broadcast, he did not intend for us to just confine our learning to this month, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that we must do, as Dr. Clark constantly encouraged us, is to rescue our history from people who would seek to disparage it in some way, shape, or form or another. So the history of African people is too long and too important to be confined to 1 month. I don't care if it's a month with 28 days, 29 days, or 31 days. I could literally spend the rest of my life studying African history and only scratch the surface. I like to say that if the history of African people were a book of 1,000 pages, the story of our enslavement begins on page 996 and is only two pages long. So my interest, my desire is to talk about the first 995 pages of the African presence, not just on the continent of Africa, but all around the world. You know, the work that Renoka Rashidi did in documenting the African presence in early Asia, the work that Ivan Van Sertima did in documenting the African presence in early America. It's important to note that some of this work is being attacked right now. Van Sertima's work about the Olmecs is now being attacked by some, unfortunately, some Hispanic scholars on the West Coast who again accuse us of appropriating their history and culture. And that is not the case. So I know for certain that there are people of intelligence, people who know not and know not that they know not, who want to learn. And there are people who know not but think they know, and they muddy the waters. They cast aspersions at people who are bringing this truth because they have an axe to grind. We've got to have the intelligence to recognize falsehoods, lies when we see them or read them. And we have an obligation and a responsibility, not just to ourselves and our descendants, but to our ancestors, to make sure that their lives are known to everyone. And to tell these stories, to be quite honest with you, Matsamela, this is not just Black history, this is world history. African people are a world people, and that is information that needs to be taught to the world because everybody on this planet has been miseducated to some extent or another, whether they realize it or not.
Absolutely. Also, you talked about Ma'at in the last episode. 7 principles, folks, of Ma'at. Truth, justice, righteousness, harmony, balance, reciprocity, and order, symbolized by a woman with wings. So a couple of questions about that.
Mm-hmm.
Ma'at, and as Tony alluded to before, that is the first, if I have this right, documented image of a human per se with wings.
Absolutely.
And from that evolves the concept of angels, correct?
Absolutely.
All right, so folks, we understand we're angels.
And I can expand on that a bit further, if you will allow me. Ma'at is also associated with the weighing of the soul of the deceased, where on many papyri, many ancient papyri in Kemet, you see the deceased who is dressed in white, because the ancients knew that white represents the absence of life.
Now,
White represented death.
Hold it, just so everybody's clear, because I want to be sure about it. When we say papyri,
right,
we're talking
papyrus was the paper that the ancient Kemites, ancient Africans used to. It comes from a plant called papyrus, and they took strips of papyrus together to make paper that they used to write inscriptions on.
Papyri paper sounds the same, y'all. Comes from a plant. A tree is a plant. Okay,
it's not a tree. It's not a tree. It's a
plant.
plant.
Not a tree, but it's still when we say paper comes from trees.
Oh yeah. Paper does come from trees now, right?
Right, it does now, right?
Mm-hmm.
More MIP after this message.
Geico asks, how would you love a chance to save money on your insurance? Of course you would. After all, who wouldn't love a great deal, right? And when it comes to great rates on insurance for all of the things in your life, Geico can help. Like with insurance for your car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and RV. Even help with homeowners, condo, or renters coverage. You could save even more with a special discount when you bundle your coverages. Plus, add the easy-to-use Geico mobile app, available 24-hour roadside assistance, and more. And choosing to switch to Geico becomes an easy choice. Switch today and see all the ways you could save with great rates and discounts. It's easy. Simply go to geico.com to get a rate quote or contact your local agent and get started seeing how much you could save.
So on papyri and so-called texts known as the Book of the Dead, erroneously referred to as the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead is a term that was introduced in the 1840s by Carl Richard Lepsius, a German Egyptologist who coined the phrase Book of the Dead because he found all of these papyrus texts among dead people. So he called them Books of the Dead, but they were originally known as Perdium Heru, or the books of coming forth by day, the words to say in order to ensure the resurrection of your soul. So one key element in many of these papyri was a scene known as the weighing of the soul of the deceased, where the deceased person dressed in white steps into the hall of Ma'at, where there is a scale and there is a balance on either side of the scale. On one side of the balance, typically on the left side of the balance, is a symbol that represents the heart of that person. On the right side of the balance is a feather, an ostrich feather, which symbolizes Ma'at and all of the principles and concepts associated with her. And while that person's heart is being weighed opposite truth and justice and righteousness, the soul of that person has to recite the 42 admonitions of Ma'at. Now, I hope I don't get anybody in trouble. Some of the 42 admonitions of Ma'at are: I have not stolen, I have not robbed, I have not defrauded offerings, I have not committed murder, I have not committed adultery, I have not polluted the land, I have not spoken ill against God. 42 declarations of innocence that the soul of the deceased would declare as their heart, which was considered in African times, ancient times, as the seat of the soul. Hence, this scene is referred to as the weighing of the soul. And if the person has been truthful to these declarations of innocence, these declarations of Ma'at, then their heart will be as light as a feather. And that's where the concept comes from. Your heart being as light as a feather. That's Ma'at. And so the image here in America that we see in front of courthouses of a woman holding the scales of justice, that's Ma'at. Except she's blindfolded because supposedly justice is blind. But if you look at images within the Catholic tradition, primarily, of the Archangel Michael, you will see the Archangel Michael holding a human being with the wings of Ma'at, holding the scale of Ma'at. And in many of these paintings, 15th century, 14th century paintings, you'll see the person, the soul of the person standing on one side of the balance, and a black figure, an evil figure representative of the devil, tugging on the scale for the soul of that person. This imagery, these concepts come straight out of Africa. And it's simply a matter of knowing their origins and placing them back into the correct historical perspective.
So this Book of the Dead, as it was called, is more appropriately called, is it not? The Book of Coming Forth by Day.
The Book of Coming Forth by Day. Peret M. Heru, coming forth by day. Heru represented daylight, sunshine. In other words, it's the words to say to ensure that you will be born again. Coming forth by day, into a new day, into a new life.
Born again resurrection, y'all. Where have we heard that before? More MIP after this message.
And we talked last week about the mirror being the place of ascension, designed to facilitate the ascension of the soul. So these concepts, brother, and this is why it's so critical for our people to get this. These concepts are African concepts that sprang from the minds of African people thousands of years ago that others have appropriated, borrowed from, and used to advance themselves. So this is Africa giving to the world. That's why my book, the book that you're holding in your hand, is called Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. All right. It's putting this knowledge into correct historical context. We're not taking anything away from anybody. What we're doing is putting information in its correct chronological perspective.
Well, we are actually obviously taking something away from white supremacists. That's the that's the problem. So
well, let's keep on doing it then.
Let's keep on doing that. So the Book of Coming Forth by Day. You all also heard Tony talking about dressing in white. And what do we say in the church? Now, I say this as one educated in Christian theology. So some of y'all might say, well, my smell is being blasphemous. No, actually, I'm not. We are talking about the origin of that. We'll get more into that, not necessarily today, but we'll get more into that as time goes on. But when Aretha Franklin sings the song, How I Got Over, you know, I want to see the host in white. That's where we're headed. We're going to be, you know, in washed in white. We're going to be in all of our white clothes. This is where some of those concepts come from. And just in terms of these words, we just talked about papyrus, the mirror, which, as we said in last week, folks, the actual name for the pyramid or the resurrection machine, as Tony has called it. Forgive me, brother, but when you say mirror, then to me that invokes mirror. Is there something there? Am I?
Well, I haven't looked into that. There may be, and I'll leave that to some other researcher. But I do want to veggie back for a minute. I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat meat, so I veggie back. I don't piggyback. On a point with regards to white, think about Mother's Day. Think about Mother's Day. If your mother's alive, you will wear a red flower, red representing life, the blood flowing through your body. If she is an ancestor, you'll wear white. In Japan, in China, white is a color associated with ancestorhood and death. So it's typical when you go to China or Japan that you bring a gift to your host and you never bring them something that is white. Right? So these are customs and traditions that are known around the world. We just don't understand their origins or their deeper meaning. And that's the beauty of history. That's the beauty of study. That's the beauty of this conversation that we're having right now.
So no, this is important, folks. And as we go on, we'll get even more into some of this, the Book of Coming Forth by Day, and my aunt as well. I'm going to come back to that, folks. Again, we remind you to visit Tony at ikg-info.com. That's for the IKG Cultural Resources, ikg-info.com, and ASA Restoration Project.com. Fret not, Tony be right back here with us tomorrow. Stay tuned. Thanks, Tony.
Peace.
Thanks for getting woke and listening to Make It Plain. Please remember to listen, like, and wherever you get your podcasts, please give the show a 5-star rating. And please do spread the word. Let's all continue to pray for each other during this pandemic and this police-demic. If all hearts and minds are clear, it has been made plain.